These are the world's freakiest sea animals. In July 2022, people in Chile gathered around to see what a fishing boat caught off their shore. The creature was 16 feet long, and the video got 20 million views when it was posted online, because people were debating whether or not this was an actual sea monster. But I'm sad to say it's not. This is an oarfish, a fish that typically lives about 3,000 feet below the surface. Next, at Laguna Beach in May 2021, people were shocked when they saw a terrifying football-looking fish washed up on the shore. This was a Pacific football fish, a fish that usually lives 3,000 feet under the surface. Basically, remember that terrifying light bulb fish from Finding Nemo? That's this guy. They're actually so rare that even marine biologists know very little about this species, and what causes them to wash up on shores. And in 2022, a fisherman named Sean Bailey was sailing around off the coast of San Diego when he spotted a weird ghost-looking creature floating on the surface of the water. But after a few minutes, it started moving again because it was just sunbathing. This is a mola mola, or an ocean sunfish. These fish live 660 feet below the ocean surface and prey on jellyfish, and then warm up by sunbathing on top of the surface. And this allows seagulls to eat the parasites off its body. So for them, it's kind of like a free trip to the spa.
These villagers dig up their dead family members every 3 years, and you won't believe why. These people are from a village in Indonesia, and during their Menem festival, they get their ancestors' corpses, clean them, then put them all out to dry, and dress them in new clothes as a ritual. And the reason is because they believe they're showing them love and respect.
This is why you should be scared of mirrors. Reddit user Liberated Man said that when he was about 12 years old, he woke up in the middle of the night to go to the bathroom. He walked across the hall to the bathroom, hit the lights, and was about to reach for the toilet when he glanced up and saw a face in the mirror. It wasn't his face. He said that it was as if someone was on the other side, standing to the right, with their face right next to the glass, staring at him. He only saw it for the briefest moment, but it seared into his brain. He screamed and ran out to find his dad. His dad, of course, investigated and then calmed him down, or tried to. They had a prayer session because he was so freaked out. Eventually, he went back to sleep. He said that fast forward to his 30s, he had forgotten all about the event, until one night, while visiting, his dad quietly brings it up. He said, "Remember that one time you saw a face in the mirror?" It suddenly came back to him in a rush of a memory, sending a chill down his spine. He said, "Yeah, I remember." And then his dad said, "Well, sometimes I think about that night." He looked down at the floor with a serious expression, and then he said, "I saw it too." He went on to describe exactly what Reddit user Liberated Man had seen. Neither of them have any idea what it was. Apparently, when his dad went to investigate, he saw it and had a freak out of his own. And the prayer session was as much for his own nerves as it was his son's.
Yep, scientists just did something you are not going to appreciate. Trust me, you're going to want to favorite this video because this could be the start of something horrendous. Because they thought today was a brilliant day to cut open 200 million-year-old parasitic eggs that they found in fossilized feces. You know, dinosaur shit. They found one of the earliest predators were infested with roundworms, otherwise known as nematodes, and other parasites. I feel like I shouldn't need to say this. Don't fucking do that! I swear after 2020 we've learned nothing! And this hasn't come long after scientists revived a previously extinct ancient worm. But don't worry, that's another horror for another day. I'll be the first to say it, I do feel like we're opening Pandora's box. We revive an ancient parasite out of the good of our hearts and then it gets out of control and destroys the world. These are the parasite samples, by the way, if you wanted to see them. They are being called Morphotype 4. Bear in mind, we are nervous about permafrost melting and releasing ancient pathogens and diseases into our worlds. And now we're willingly sawing open dinosaur shit that includes a parasite. I mean, does 1 + 1 = 5? Personally, I'm not a fan of this one, so send this to a friend because they need to know what's going on. I'm terrified. Elon!
Forbidden places that you can never visit. Snake Island is an island off of the coast of Brazil. filled with deadly snakes. Rising sea levels caused this piece of land to become an island, allowing for the snakes to flourish in their own environment. There are now up to 5 snakes every square meter, and you are not allowed to go here. In Svalbard, Norway, there is a global seed vault, aka the Doomsday Vault. It is the world's seed bank, storing samples of crops from all over the world just in case of a global catastrophe. The tomb of Qin Shi Huang in China holds an army of warriors made of clay. It protects the burial spot of the first emperor of China who died in 210 BC, and we only discovered this tomb in 1974. Paveglia Island in Italy was used to exile hundreds of thousands of victims of the plague. It is said to be one of the most haunted places on Earth, and a dark local legend says that 50% of the soil is made up of human remains. Follow for more.
Was this the worst form of medieval punishment? If you found yourself as a prisoner in a medieval castle, you may be subject to the dungeon, torture, or even execution. But what could be worse? Well, let me tell you about the oubliette, also known as the Forgotten Room. This was a specialized type of prison in some medieval castles, perhaps for the worst of offenders. It was a narrow shaft, sometimes 8 feet deep, with only one entrance and exit, a trapdoor located on the ceiling. The shaft being so narrow that the individual would be forced to stand. They couldn't kneel, they couldn't sit, they could barely turn around. The fall alone into the oubliette would sometimes break bones. In some cases, these would even be built into the upper walls of the castle, so the victim could hear the hustle and bustle of castle life, but could not escape. Depending on the situation or individual, they might throw you some food and water if you were to be kept alive. In most cases, you were subject to stand there, starve to death, and then be devoured by vermin. The most you could do was stand there, look up at the grate, and realize you cannot escape. Oh yeah, did I also mention sometimes jagged stones would be placed at the bottom? And of course, you were also subject to stand in your own waste. Leap Castle, which is located in Ireland, had quite an active oubliette. So many skeletons were discovered in one in the 1920s that it took 3 cartloads to transport them off the property. Between the sleep deprivation, the starvation, the psychological torture, and the claustrophobia, I think this is the worst form of medieval torture.
Facts that I wish I didn't know. When you die, the last thing to go is your hearing. So as all your other mortal sensations are leaving this world, the last thing you're ever going to experience are the sounds going on around you, which very well could be like your family members crying or cheering. By the year 2050, there's going to be more plastic in the ocean than fish. When pigs get a cold, like a cough, very often they will shoot their intestines out of their anus, and farmers have to, like, stuff it back in.
Fun fact, Michel Lotito, aka Mr. Eats Everything, was a French performance artist who once ate an entire Cessna 150 airplane. Holding the Guinness World Record for strangest diet, Michel first became aware of his strange affliction when he was 9 years old, and the glass he was drinking from broke, and he began chewing on the broken glass fragments and liked them. Throughout the course of his life, he consumed 8 bicycles, 15 supermarket trolleys, 7 TV sets, 6 chandeliers, 2 beds, also a waterbed full of water, a pair of skis, a coffin, 1,600 feet of steel chain, a ton of random stuff like glasses, plates, and razor blades, and of course, a Cessna 150 airplane. He began eating the plane in 1978 and spent 2 years consuming it bite by bite, cutting the plane into edible pieces about 1 to 2 centimeters long until he finally finished his meal in 1980. To protect his stomach and intestines from getting pierced by any sharp objects, Mr. Lotito would consume a ton of mineral oil and water during his meals to help the metal, glass, or whatever else move through his system. Michel Lotito passed away in 2007 at the age of 57 from natural causes.
These are the world's freakiest land animals. In 2022, a TikToker named Caustica uploaded a video that showed a weird-looking creature running around his backyard. Once the video went viral, wildlife experts took to the comments to explain that it was a lesser blind mole rat. And this is because of how its tiny eyes are nearly tucked under its skin. They spend most of their time underground creating tunnels with their massive teeth. In 2020 in British Columbia, a woman was walking around when she saw a bug that looked like a tarantula with wings. She then shared a photo of the bug to Facebook, book, where wildlife experts explain that this was a very big moth called a polyphemus moth. These moths have huge bodies, and despite their scary looks, they don't have mouths to bite. And they have a lifespan of about 2 weeks. And in 2024 in Sydney, Australia, a TikToker named Blonde heard a weird tapping sound coming from her window at night, and she went to investigate. And what she found is like something out of nightmares. At her window, a bat was tapping on the glass, trying to find a way to escape the storm. And it stayed around until the next morning, where Blonde had to call a bat expert to come remove it. But this turned out to be a non-aggressive species of a bat known as a flying fox. And they only eat fruit or flowers. They also struggle to keep warm when they're wet, which explains why it was at her window. Now I just feel sorry for the little guy.
What is the dirtiest country in the world? Well, firstly, the cleanest country in the world is Denmark. It's also labelled the most environmentally friendly. But what country is the dirtiest? In 5th place, it's Pakistan. Pakistan is home to the world's most polluted city, Lahore, and has become a major problem in Pakistan. The air is voted hazardous for breathing, and Pakistan is also voted 3rd highest for public defecation. In 4th place, it's Bangladesh. Bangladesh suffers from pollution also, mostly from vehicles, factory fumes and dust. The air quality in Dhaka, one of the world's most crowded cities, is also labelled as very poor and dangerous. The serious overpopulation in Bangladesh is also a huge factor contributing to this. In 3rd place, it's Vietnam. Vietnam is very polluted due to the transportation system and the excess cars and motorbikes on the road. The water is very polluted due to trash being thrown away and neglected, and a lot of the popular cities can be covered in litter. In 2nd place, it's Myanmar. Myanmar has suffered badly with trash pollution, but most of all, water pollution. Myanmar have a long-lasting problem with dirty water. More than anything, being a river cleaner is a job, collecting trash such as plastics and cans, then selling it, making up to $10 a day. Finally, in 1st place, it's India. India have suffered really badly from air pollution, trash and hygiene issues. It is number 1 in the world for public defecation, and overpopulation has been becoming a concern for India as the country is growing at a very fast rate. Most of the lakes and rivers are poisonous and hazardous, and the pollution in some areas is very severe, making it the most polluted country on Earth. If you enjoy videos like these, please follow our page for more facts.
Can you believe that this was almost the Ghostface mask for Scream? While scouting out locations for the first Scream movie, they stumbled upon a mask in an abandoned house. It was produced by a company named Fun World, and it was called the Peanut-Eyed Ghost. Well, Fun World wanted a little bit too much money for them to use their mask, so they went to the drawing boards. Here are just a few of the concepts that they drew up. Quite different, huh? They were eventually able to come to an agreement, and thus one of the most iconic horror masks of all time was born. This may look like a Wish.com Michael Myers mask, but it's actually from the original movie. 43 years ago, they painted a Captain Kirk mask white, and now we have one of the most iconic horror killers ever. I'm actually impressed with how well it held up over that long. Who is the most realistic psychopath in cinematic history? Starting in 2014, Belgian professor Samuel Liestad wanted to know which movie characters best represented psychotic traits. Over the course of 3 years, him and 10 of his friends watched over 400 movies, spanning from 1915 all the way to 2010, trying to find the best movie psycho. Believe it or not, Norman Bates, Patrick Bateman, and Hannibal Lecter didn't even make the cut. The team believed that their traits did not quite fit the psychopath mold. They all agreed that the best movie psychopath was Anton Chigurh in No Country for Old Men. They wrote that he seems to be effectively invulnerable and resilient to any form of emotion and humanity, and I 100% must agree. Their runners-up were Hans Beckert in the 1931 German film M, and Henry Lee Lucas in Henry, Portrait of a Serial Killer. Who is your favorite movie psychopath?
These are the safest countries to go if World War III was to start. And considering the news at the moment, you might want to sit down, shut up, and listen! So favorite this video, just in case you ever need it. I hope we never do. Now there are countries all around the world But let's start with Argentina. Now, if this was to all break out, it's likely that the world would look similar to Terminator 2 Judgment Day at the end. It's likely that all the smoke from all of these will block out the sun, this resulting very quickly in famine and crop failure. But don't panic, because we have Argentina. In Argentina, there are an abundance of resistant crops, such as wheat. This is one of the places on Earth that actually has a chance of surviving World War III. Next up, we have one of the big ones, Switzerland. Now, aside from the fact that it is incredibly neutral when it comes to politics, it has a landlocked geography and mountainous terrain, as well as being one of the countries with an insane amount of underground bunkers. Actually, there's 26,000 of them, which are actually all very hidden, which will mean you will be very safe. As well, just in case there is an invasion, Switzerland literally has booby traps everywhere. It's actually kind of insane. And awesome! Next up, we have one of the big ones, Antarctica. Now, barely anyone thinks about going there, which is why it's pretty safe. However, as you can tell, it's a bit fucking cold, so bring a coat. Next up, we have Greenland. Now, it was in this movie, and they all survived. But on top of that, it's remote, mountainous, and politically neutral, making it kind of an ideal refuge point. But on top of that, worst case scenario, you're not too far away from the global seed vaults, which, you know, has a lot of seeds in it for planting, and thus food and survival. There are literally so many more countries on this list. So if you'd like me to go through more countries in a part 2, let me know. And hopefully we'll never need this video. But just in case we do send this to a friend, it could save their life one day. Elon!
One of the biggest mysteries in history has finally been solved. Alright, firstly, in 1915, explorer Ernest Shackleton and his crew set off for a voyage to explore Antarctica. However, before they could make it to Antarctica, the ship they were on, known as the Endurance, got trapped and crushed by the ice. Now, with no other options left, all of the members on board had to navigate a lifeboat hundreds of miles to safety. This journey to safety, all of the crew survived many storms, even one being a hurricane, until they got onto a rescue boat. Even though they failed to get to Antarctica, this became a famous story because they didn't let a setback crush their spirit. But for over a century, the biggest mystery was, where did the ship end up? And believe it or not, but in 2022, the ship was actually discovered and they were so close to where they wanted to be. It was found 2 miles underwater, and because of the frigid temperatures, it was actually pretty well preserved.
A few wholesome history facts to brighten your day. In 1957, Northeast Airlines Flight 823 crashed onto Rikers Island. Prison staff and inmates alike ran to help the survivors. To acknowledge the heroic actions of the 57 inmates who helped, 30 were released and 16 got a reduced sentence. When Anthony Smith was 4 years old, he was fitted with a hearing aid, but soon became depressed and refused to wear it, saying, "Superheroes don't wear hearing aids." His mother, desperate for help, reached out to Marvel. In response, they created the superhero Blue Ear in his likeness. The zip-up cardigans that you would always see Mr. Rogers wear were actually made by his mother. She also knitted them for military troops in Pennsylvania. One of them is now located in the Smithsonian Museum. 3 completely useless yet interesting facts. Have you ever wondered why barns are typically painted red? It has nothing to do with the color itself, but for its usefulness. Long ago, different colored paints and sealers weren't an option for farmers. They needed to make sure they found or made a paint or sealer that would protect the wood on their barn. They would seal their barns with linseed oil. They would add milk, lime, and iron oxide. Rust would kill fungi and mosses and worked as a great sealant. It also turned the mixture red in color. Have you ever wondered why there's cotton inside of some pill bottles? The tradition of doing so started in the early 1900s when Bayer would put cotton in their bottles to prevent breakage of their pills during shipment. And finally, what is the purpose of putting your phone in airplane mode when you're riding on a plane? I mean, there's absolutely no way that could cause a problem while you're on an airplane, but it actually could. You see, airplane mode disables all wireless and cellular signals coming from the phone. Believe it or not, those signals could actually interfere with important
Let's talk a little bit about what's going on in Austin, Texas right now. A lot of the locals there who believe what they're watching is a serial killer.
on the streets. Somebody who is roaming the city undetected, and it all ties back to Lady Bird Lake and all of the bodies that continue to appear in that lake under very strange circumstances. So they think that this is connected to the nightlife on Rainy Street. The thought being that a lot of young men, while they're out at bars, are getting profiled at these bars. The suspicion is that their drinks are getting drugged and then they are wandering off on foot. Now, pathway-wise, they eventually make their way to Lady Bird Lake, but somebody is following these men. The suspicion being that they are drowned in the lake and then the bodies are recovered. However, there is somebody who is suspected to be a survivor of an alleged attack. So what he remembered was that he was definitely drugged while he was out at a bar and then was on foot. While on foot, he was then crossing a bridge near Lady Bird Lake where he was pushed off by someone. Whoever that mysterious figure was who did push him off of the bridge, it's an unknown. And I would say the bigger question is, why are the Austin PD not investigating this?
This is the case of the girl that vanished into thin air. Her name is Yuki Onishi. On April 29th of 2005, 5-year-old Yuki was out celebrating Greenery Day with her mother. It's a national holiday in Japan, and what they do is they go out, they celebrate nature, and they collect bamboo shoots. So Yuki, her mom, and 60 other people were out doing this. Yuki was so excited that she found her first bamboo shoot, she showed her mother, and then she ran off to find more. That's when she disappeared and was never seen from again. When they realized that she was nowhere to be found, they actually brought in search dogs and the police. This is where it gets really strange. The dogs followed her scent to the middle of the forest and then just stopped. The scent stopped in the middle of the forest as if she had just disappeared into thin air from that spot. To this day, she has never been found and no one knows what happened. If you want to hear some theories, come back for part 2.
Creepy last words people said right before dying. Registered nurse Shirley Smith said that she had a very rich patient who was a true Satanist that was dying of cancer. The patient had upside-down crosses and a Satan's Bible by her bedside. Shirley said that she will never forget what happened. It was the middle of the summer, and yet it was so cold and dark in her room that you couldn't even stand it, even in the middle of the day. She said that it got so evil feeling in there that she had to call a priest to pray with her and her aides before they would even enter the room. When the patient passed away, she had not spoken in over 24 hours. And then all of a sudden, she sat straight up and said, "Satan, take me." And then she fell back on the bed. Shirley said that after she passed, the room got bright and extremely warm. Shockingly, when they moved the patient's body, they had to get rid of the mattress because where her body had been, it looked burnt. And the most horrible smell was emanating from the mattress cover. Needless to say, Shirley went to confession immediately because she did not want an evil spirit around her. A nurse said that one of their patients had a serious recurrence and had to be admitted. Over the course of several nights, he had become quite upset during rounds. He kept asking for his wallet, saying that he had to pay the ferryman. The medical student on rotation in the department took a quarter out of his pocket and put it in the patient's hand. The patient then dropped the coin into the cup on his bedstand and calmed down. Later that night, he passed away quietly. The nurse asked what happened. The medical student, who remembered his Greek mythology, said that the patient had to pay Charon, the ferryman, to be taken across the river Styx. A nurse said that he was doing rounds at a hospital. There was one 2-patient room, and one of the patients was a very loud and confused woman who could be quite a handful. On this particular night, she had a roommate who had passed away shortly before the nurse entered the room. She was DNR, so there was no code blue. When he entered the room, he noticed that the elderly lady, who was usually very loud and confused, was sitting quietly with her hands crossed neatly upon her lap. Something was different, and there was this look of serenity on her face. She asked him in a voice that seemed much younger and clearer than before, "Did you see them, young man? They're so beautiful." He said, "No, ma'am, there's no one else here." She said, "They're right next to you, talking to Mrs. Banneker. The angels. They're so beautiful." He said that he instantly felt every hair of his body stand up, and an electric tingle course up and down his spine. "They're not here for me this time," she said sadly.